Hey everyone, welcome to Life Reflections. Today I'm sharing a life story that might just hit home for you. If you enjoy it, give it a thumbs up, drop a comment with your thoughts, and hit that subscribe button to join me for more moments that matter. Let's dive in.
It was supposed to be the moment I had been waiting for, the day I would meet the tiny person who had been growing inside me for the past 9 months. The day I would finally hold my baby in my arms, after months of anticipation, sleepless nights, and the growing weight of responsibility. But what happened next wasn't anything I had prepared for. Not in my wildest dreams. I was sitting in the front seat of our old, beat-up car, clutching my belly as the first sharp pangs of labor began. My water had broken. The waves of pain hit me one after another, tightening around my midsection, like clockwork. This was it. My baby was coming. But as the pain surged through me, I realized I was completely alone. The man who was supposed to be there for me, who was supposed to support me in this most vulnerable moment, was nowhere to be found. My husband, Ben, had left me in the car. And not just in the car, but stranded on the side of the road. Alone, panicking, struggling to catch my breath as the contractions intensified, I looked to him for help. But instead of rushing to my side, instead of panicking or showing any concern, Ben did something I will never forget. He stared at me, frowning, annoyed that I had ruined his day. "Are you serious right now? You're making a scene over this? It's just a little water. We'll get to the hospital in a bit." And with that, he just walked away. No urgency, no care. It was like he didn't even recognize that the woman he claimed to love was about to give birth, and that she was in need of help. I sat there, stunned. I couldn't even process what was happening at first. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, none of them making sense. Was this really happening? Was the man I married really leaving me, in the middle of labor, to go on with his trip like nothing was wrong? As the pain coursed through me, I found myself trying to gather whatever little strength I had left. My body was shaking, and I couldn't breathe properly. The panic that started to rise was real. The one person who was supposed to be my support, my partner in this monumental life event, had just walked away, leaving me to fend for myself. He went back to the trunk of the car, grabbed his suitcase, and threw it on the sidewalk. "I'm not missing my trip. Call a cab or something. I'm not dealing with this right now." The words stung more than I could explain. It felt like a punch to the gut, one that I couldn't prepare for. I was left in that moment of terror, unable to move, unable to think clearly. How could he do this to me? I sat there, helpless, as my husband drove off, and I was left to face the reality that not only was I about to give birth, but I was doing it alone. No partner, no support, no one to hold my hand and guide me through this process. Just the empty sound of his engine fading into the distance. I tried to get out of the car. I knew I had to move. I knew I needed help. But my body refused to cooperate. Every step I took felt like I was being dragged back down into the ground. The pain was unbearable, the contractions coming faster, and I didn't know if I could make it to the hospital in time. But what did Ben care? He was already driving away, his mind set on his family trip, probably already distracted by the view from the car window. Tears blurred my vision as I tried to pull myself together. How could this be my reality? I had trusted this man with my life, with the life of our child. And here he was, choosing a vacation over the birth of our baby. It felt like the world was crashing down around me, like every dream I had ever had about the kind of life I would build with Ben was shattering into pieces. How had I gotten here? I was a woman on the verge of becoming a mother, and the man I had hoped would be my rock, my partner, had just proven that I was on my own. He had abandoned me in the most vulnerable moment of my life. The moment I needed him most. The irony didn't escape me. Here I was, about to bring life into this world, and yet I was being left to fight for my survival. But in that moment of terror, of confusion, of pure pain, something shifted inside me. I wasn't just fighting for my baby anymore. I was fighting for myself. It started out small, almost imperceptible, like cracks forming on the surface of something that seemed strong and unbreakable. At first, it was easy to brush off, a comment here, a little dig there. But over time, those cracks deepened, turning into chasms that swallowed up the love I thought I had. I never imagined it would be like this. When Ben and I first got together, he seemed like everything I had ever dreamed of. He was thoughtful, kind, always there when I needed him. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Maybe it was the long hours at the office, or the pressure of his demanding job in finance, but it wasn't just his work schedule that started to take him away from me, it was him. I tried not to notice it at first. Life was busy, we were both adjusting to new responsibilities. But as the days passed, I began to see a pattern, a subtle shift in the way Ben treated me. At first, it was little things. He would forget about the plans we made to spend the weekend together. Or he would be late, again, for dinner, leaving me sitting at the table, a warm meal cooling on the plate as I stared at the empty chair across from me. I had tried to make excuses for him. I told myself it was just work, it was just the pressure. But it wasn't just work. It was something deeper. It was the way he started to talk to me, the way he looked at me, like I was no longer the woman he had fallen in love with, but a mere obstacle to the life he wanted to live. Soon, I started feeling like I was living in a parallel universe. I was in the same house as Ben, but it felt like I was alone. The moments that used to be ours, shared and intimate, became distant, mechanical. It wasn't even the big things, it was the small, everyday interactions that slowly started to chip away at the foundation of our relationship. When I needed him, when I was physically exhausted and emotionally drained from carrying our child, he was nowhere to be found. There were times I would stand in the kitchen, hands on my swollen belly, looking out the window, silently hoping he would come through the door, smile at me, and ask how I was doing. But the door would open, and he would pass by me without a second glance, focused solely on his phone or the TV. And it wasn't just about being ignored, it was the things he said that really started to hurt. One night, I had made a simple dinner, nothing fancy, just a warm meal to share, and when he sat down at the table, he looked at me with that all-too-familiar frown. "You burned the bread again," he said, not even trying to hide the annoyance in his voice. I bit my lip, swallowing the sting of his words. It wasn't the first time he had criticized me like that, but it felt like it was the 100th. And it wasn't just the cooking, it was everything. "Why can't you make things like my mom does?" he would ask, sometimes without even realizing how cutting it sounded. His mother, the unspoken standard of perfection, was always brought up in comparison to me. Her cooking, her house, her smile, nothing I did seemed to measure up. I knew I was supposed to be understanding. I told myself that he didn't mean it, that he was just venting his frustration. But deep down, it hurt. It hurt more than I could express. It wasn't just about food or cleaning, though. It was about my place in his life. I felt like I had become invisible to him. No matter how much I tried to keep up with the household chores, the appointments, the plans for the baby, it was never enough. And when I needed help with something, like when I was too tired to move or too overwhelmed to focus, his response was always the same: "You're on maternity leave. You have time." He didn't see the exhaustion in my eyes, the physical pain in my body. He didn't understand the mental toll of carrying a child, of trying to prepare for the future while drowning in a sea of uncertainty and fear. There was one afternoon I will never forget. The sun was beating down on me as I struggled to carry the last of the groceries from the car into the house. My back ached, my legs wobbled beneath me, and every step felt like I was dragging a weight. I could feel sweat pouring down my face as I struggled to make it to the front door. I texted Ben, hoping he'd come out and help me, but when I heard the garage door open and Ben came into view, I was shocked to see that he was in his fishing gear. Without even a second glance at me, he waved and said, "I'll be back later. I'm going fishing with my dad." I stood there in the heat, bags of groceries still in my hands, and my heart sank. I couldn't even bring myself to say anything. What could I say? He had already made up his mind. He always did. As I put the bags down and trudged inside, The thought gnawed at me, did I choose the wrong person? But the baby inside me kicked, and for a moment, I remembered that I wasn't entirely alone. The baby, my little one, was my only source of hope. My only reason to keep going when everything else felt like it was falling apart. In the weeks that followed, things didn't improve. They only got worse. Ben continued to drift further away, and I felt myself sinking deeper into the role of being an invisible woman. A woman who was carrying the future of this family, yet was being treated like she didn't matter. And then came the weekend. Ben decided to take another trip. This time, he said, he was going away with his parents for a few days, and I was supposed to just stay behind and wait. I couldn't take it anymore. This wasn't just about him going away, it was about his complete disregard for me, for our baby, and for the life we were supposed to be building together. I asked him to reconsider. Ben, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, I'm due soon. What if I go into labor while you're gone? He waved me off, dismissing my concern with the wave of his hand. You'll be fine. Pregnant women are not as fragile as you think. He laughed it off. My mom worked right up until the day she gave birth. You're just being dramatic. I didn't argue. I knew it would just lead to more frustration, more disappointment. Instead, I quietly packed my things, trying to swallow the growing anxiety in my chest. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe I was overreacting. But something deep inside me told me this was wrong. The truth was, I was scared. I was scared of what I was becoming, a woman who had given everything, only to be left with nothing but empty promises and a broken heart. I wasn't sure how much more I could take. But I kept quiet, pushed down the emotions, and decided to wait. For him to come home. For things to get better. Maybe after the baby was born, everything would fall into place. But inside, I knew something had already broken. And no amount of silence or tolerance could fix it. There are moments in life when you realize that people don't always show up when you expect them to. It's often the ones you think should be there for you, the ones who are supposed to be your family, your partner, the ones who promise to stand by you through thick and thin, who end up failing you in the most critical times. But then, there are other people. People who come into your life when you least expect them. People who remind you that true kindness still exists. That person, in my case, was Chloe. Chloe wasn't someone I had known for long. She was my neighbor, the one who lived a few houses down the street, always smiling whenever we crossed paths in the yard. She was the kind of person who would wave at you as you rushed to your car, or share a quick "how's it going" when you passed by her mailbox. To be honest, before everything fell apart with Ben, I hadn't really paid much attention to her. She was just a friendly face in the neighborhood, but not someone I thought I'd lean on. But everything changed the day I found myself alone in the most vulnerable moment of my life. It was the day Ben left me stranded, the day I went into labor while he went off on a trip with his parents, leaving me in a situation that no woman should ever have to face. When my water broke, and I was sitting there, abandoned in the car, I realized just how much I had been fighting alone. I was terrified. My body was racked with pain from the contractions, and there was no one, not Ben, not anyone, to help me. I remember that moment so clearly, the weight of it crushing me. I felt like I was being thrown into the deep end, without a life raft. That's when Chloe came into the picture. I was sitting in the car, dazed and struggling with the contractions when I finally managed to pull myself together enough to call for help. My fingers were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the phone, but somehow I managed to dial Chloe's number. She had always been friendly, but I never imagined she would be the one to come to my rescue in the way she did. Sophie? Her voice came through the phone with genuine concern. Where are you? What's going on? I could barely speak through the pain, but I managed to tell her. Chloe, I'm in labor. My water broke, and I don't know what to do. Ben, he's gone. The next thing I knew, she was already in her car, driving toward me, like an angel sent from nowhere. I felt a mix of fear, gratitude, and disbelief. Chloe had barely known me, and yet, she was the one coming to help me when my own husband had driven off without a care. When she pulled up beside me, her face was full of worry, her eyes scanning me quickly to make sure I was okay. Without hesitation, she got out of her car and rushed to my side, gently taking my arm and helping me into her car. "It's okay, Sophie. We're going to get you to the hospital. I'm here for you." Her voice was calm, steady. She didn't need to say anything more. She didn't need to ask questions or offer empty words of reassurance. Her presence alone was enough to make me feel like maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. As she drove me to the hospital, Chloe didn't rush. She kept one hand on mine, offering me comfort with every squeeze. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, not just from the physical pain, but from the overwhelming gratitude I felt for this woman who, without any hesitation, stepped in to do what Ben should have. We didn't talk much during the ride. There was no need. Chloe's steady, quiet presence spoke volumes. Every time a contraction hit, she would glance over, make sure I was okay, and offer me comforting words. In that moment, I wasn't just a woman in pain. I wasn't just a woman who had been abandoned. I was someone being cared for, by someone who truly wanted to make sure I was okay. By the time we arrived at the hospital, I was in full-blown labor. Chloe stayed with me every step of the way. She didn't leave my side for hours. She held my hand through the painful contractions, offered me a drink when I was parched, and even helped calm me down when the fear of the unknown started to take over. Ben was still nowhere to be found. But Chloe? She was there. And that's what mattered. When the doctor finally said it was time to push, Chloe was the first one to encourage me. She wasn't just there as a bystander, she was invested in helping me bring my daughter into the world. Her calm energy was a stark contrast to the chaos in the room, and it gave me strength. Chloe became the person I needed most, even though I didn't realize it until that very moment. And then, when my daughter, Sophia, was born, Chloe was the first to meet her. She had seen me at my weakest, but now, she was there to witness my triumph, the birth of my child. As I held Sophia for the first time, Chloe leaned in and whispered, "You did it, Sophie. She's perfect. You're perfect." It was such a simple statement, but it meant the world to me. I wasn't alone anymore. And I had Chloe to thank for that. Without her, I honestly don't know what would have happened. She wasn't just my neighbor anymore, she was my lifeline. But Chloe didn't just stop at helping me in the hospital. She continued to support me every day after I returned home. She brought me meals when I couldn't get out of bed. She helped me with Sophia when I was exhausted. She even held my hand when I cried, listening as I poured out my pain about Ben, about how everything had changed. Through every dark moment, Chloe was there. And in a strange way, she became the sister I never had. But she didn't just help with the practical things. She showed me what real kindness looks like. Chloe didn't owe me anything. She didn't have to help me. But she did, without question, without hesitation. Her actions were not just kind, they were life-changing. She gave me the space to heal, physically and emotionally, and in doing so, she reminded me that sometimes, the people who truly matter aren't the ones who are supposed to be there for you by blood or obligation. They're the ones who step up when no one else does. The pain was unbearable. It came in waves, each one stronger than the last, each one pulling me deeper into a sea of helplessness. The room was spinning, the lights too bright, and the beeping of the monitors sounded like distant thunder as my body prepared for the most intense moment of my life. I was alone, though I didn't want to admit it. There was supposed to be someone here with me, wasn't there? Someone who was supposed to be my partner in this, my husband. But instead of having his hand in mine, offering me a reassuring squeeze, instead of being there to tell me everything would be okay, I had nothing but the echo of the empty space beside me. Ben wasn't here. And he wasn't coming. The moment my water broke and the first pang of contractions hit, I tried to reach out to him. But when I called him, my voice trembling with fear, all I got was a cold, uninterested response, "You're fine. I'll be there later." But the later never came. The later never came. That was the first hint that something had gone terribly wrong, not just in the moment, but in everything. The man I trusted to be my rock in this monumental life event had already emotionally abandoned me long before that day. Ben had already left, gone on his trip with his parents. He had made his choice. And that choice was clear. His plans mattered more than I did. His comfort was more important than the woman who was about to give him a child. And yet, in the midst of all the chaos, in the midst of the pain and the fear, I had tried to keep my composure. I had told myself, once the baby comes, everything will change. He will see what's important. We will fix this. He'll step up. But that was a lie I had been telling myself for months. I remember every detail of that room as I laid there, labor progressing faster than I had anticipated, every breath harder to catch than the last. The nurses hovered over me, their calm professionalism doing little to ease the burning frustration in my chest. They kept telling me to breathe, to relax, to focus on the baby, but the only thing I could focus on was the fact that Ben wasn't here. I kept thinking of all the times he had let me down in the months leading up to this moment, the way he'd criticized me for the smallest things, the way he had distanced himself, the way he had dismissed my needs as mere complaints. Each of those memories flooded me as the pain intensified, making me question everything I had believed in, not just about our marriage, but about the man I had once thought would be my partner forever. As the contractions continued to come and go, and the baby's arrival grew closer, I felt a surge of frustration. I was doing this alone. There was no turning back now. But with each passing minute, I couldn't stop thinking, how did it come to this? How did I end up here, giving birth without the person who was supposed to be beside me, without the man I thought I could rely on? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. How had Ben been so selfish? He had the audacity to leave me, a woman who was carrying his child, and go on a trip, acting as though his life, his leisure, mattered more than this moment. More than our child. More than the family we had created together. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the tears that were threatening to spill. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout at the top of my lungs that I wasn't just some background character in this marriage, that I was important. That I had given up everything for this family, for him, for the baby. But as the pain hit me like a freight train, I realized I didn't have the strength to scream. I didn't have the energy for anything other than to survive this moment, to get through this labor and deliver my baby, alone. But there was something else I couldn't escape. The truth hit me like a slap in the face. Ben was never going to change. He had already shown me who he was. This wasn't just about missing a few hours or a few days. This was about something deeper, something fundamental. I had been emotionally abandoned long before he physically left. This was the moment I realized that the man I thought I married, the man I had trusted, was never going to be the partner I needed. And in that instant, I realized I was no longer just giving birth to our child, I was also birthing a new version of myself. A version who no longer believed in the empty promises Ben had made. A version who had finally seen through the illusions I had been holding on to for so long. As I lay there, the final push came. The baby's head was crowned. And in that moment, everything that had built up inside me, the disappointment, the frustration, the heartache, came rushing out in the form of a cry. It wasn't just the cry of a woman bringing new life into the world. It was the cry of a woman who was finally letting go of everything she had held on to for far too long. And when I heard that first cry, that beautiful sound that meant my baby was finally here, I felt a wave of relief. I had made it. I had done this. But as I held my daughter in my arms for the first time, the wave of anger and hurt didn't disappear. Instead, it was replaced by something else, determination. I didn't need Ben to make this moment perfect. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need his presence. I had my baby. And that was enough. The reality of the betrayal stung. It still hurt, deeply, to know that Ben had abandoned me in this moment. But as I looked down at my daughter, holding her tiny body close to mine, I realized that everything I needed had been right in front of me all along. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. I had her. And that was when I made the decision that would change everything. I was done. Done trying to make this marriage work. Done hoping Ben would come around. Done settling for a life where I wasn't truly valued. I had brought new life into this world, and in doing so, I had finally brought new life to myself. I would no longer allow myself to be treated like this. I was strong. I was resilient. And I was done waiting for a man who didn't care. The emotional climax wasn't just the birth of my child, it was the birth of a new, empowered version of myself. A version who would no longer tolerate being abandoned, ignored, and mistreated. A version who would fight for herself and her daughter. And in that moment, as I looked down at my baby, I knew I was going to be okay. I was going to be better than okay. I was going to build a life of love, strength, and self-respect, one that Ben had never been a part of. The world can be a strange place, where actions, no matter how hidden they might seem at the time, have a way of coming back to haunt us. For Ben, the man I had once called my husband, life had a way of showing him that his decisions would not only affect our marriage but would echo across his life in ways he never imagined. In the days following the birth of my daughter, Sophia, I was still in the process of picking up the pieces of a life that had crumbled under the weight of betrayal. But as the days went by, there was one thing I knew for certain: Ben wasn't going to get away with this. I had spent weeks, no, months, quietly convincing myself that things would somehow get better, that Ben would come to his senses, that somehow, his selfishness would fade and we'd return to the life we had before. But I had learned the hardest lesson of all: people don't change unless they want to, and Ben had made it clear he didn't want to. However, I also realized something else. My power, my strength, didn't come from waiting for him to change. It came from me taking control of the situation. I had made the decision that I would raise my daughter on my own if necessary, that I would not live in a marriage where I was left to fend for myself. And more than anything, I had decided that Ben would be held accountable for his actions. Justice had to be served. I didn't plan for the world to find out what happened to me. I didn't intend for anyone to see the video that would soon spread like wildfire. But sometimes, fate has a way of forcing you to confront things you'd rather leave behind. The video of Ben walking away from me while I was in labor, leaving me stranded in that car, went viral. It was a simple recording, taken by a stranger who had witnessed the entire scene unfold. The footage was raw, painful, and devastatingly real. The camera captured Ben's indifference, his coldness, his complete lack of empathy for the woman who was about to bring his child into the world. At first, I didn't know the video existed. I didn't even realize someone had filmed it. But as soon as it hit social media, the shockwaves were immediate. People around the world reacted with anger, disbelief, and frustration. How could anyone, let alone a husband, abandon his wife in such a vulnerable moment? How could someone be so cold? The video quickly gained traction. It was shared, reposted, and commented on by thousands of people. The hashtag Ben the Betrayer began trending. There were memes, viral threads, and even news outlets picking up the story. Ben's reputation, which had once been solid in his professional world, began to crumble under the weight of the public's outrage. But the truth was, this wasn't about revenge. At least, not in the way most people would think. It wasn't about getting back at Ben for the sake of my pride. It was about the fact that his behavior needed to have consequences, because if it didn't, he would think he could get away with anything. And I refused to let him walk away from this. Ben's company, the one where he had worked for years, was one of the first places to respond. They were shocked. They had never seen this side of him, and while they couldn't deny the evidence, they didn't immediately know how to handle the fallout. His superiors were initially hesitant to take action, as they saw Ben as a top performer, his numbers, his results, his work ethic. But when the video made its way to the higher-ups, they had no choice but to take notice. The backlash was swift, and within days, Ben was called in for a meeting that would change everything. The company told him they could no longer ignore the incident. They couldn't keep a man who was now the subject of public ridicule on their payroll. After an internal review, which involved not only his actions but the public outrage, Ben was fired. It was almost poetic justice. The man who had walked away from his wife at her most vulnerable was now walking away from his job, a job he had worked tirelessly to maintain. But this wasn't just about losing his job. It was about the fact that his entire reputation, his career, his social standing, was in tatters because of the video. His personal life had collided with his professional one in a way he couldn't escape. While the world watched Ben's fall from grace, I found a sense of peace. The first few days after the news broke were a blur. I didn't care about Ben's job. I didn't care about his apology or his regret. I had stopped caring about him a long time ago. What mattered to me was that I had taken control of my life. What mattered was that my daughter and I were going to be okay, no matter what. Ben's reaction to all of this was predictable. He tried to reach out to me, but not in the way I had hoped. He didn't apologize for what he had done. He didn't acknowledge the pain he caused. Instead, he tried to manipulate the situation, trying to convince me that I was overreacting, that it wasn't as bad as the video made it seem. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. I was no longer that woman who had tolerated his excuses. I wasn't going to let him twist the narrative in his favor. When he called, I didn't answer. When he sent texts, I ignored them. And when he showed up at my door, I didn't even open it. The door was closed. And it wasn't just physically closed, it was closed emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. I didn't need Ben anymore. I had Sophia. And I was going to give her everything she deserved, a life filled with love, peace, and stability, without the chaos that Ben had brought into our world. But the real sense of peace came when I realized that justice had been served, not by some grand act of vengeance, but by the simple fact that I had stood up for myself. The video of Ben's abandonment had exposed his true character to the world, and now, there was no escaping it. People saw him for who he truly was, a man who cared more about his own selfish needs than the woman who had loved him and the child he had helped create. I felt no joy in his downfall. It wasn't a victory for me. It wasn't a moment to celebrate his pain. It was a moment of liberation. I had finally let go of the hope that things would change, and in doing so, I was able to move forward with my life. As the weeks went by, I found myself growing stronger. My bond with Sophia deepened, and I began to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt lonely, days when I wondered if I was doing the right thing. But with every day that passed, I grew more confident. I was building the life I wanted. And Ben? He faded into the background. The man who had once been everything to me was now just a distant memory, a chapter one no longer needed to read. I found peace in knowing that I had done the right thing for myself, for my daughter, and for my future. Justice wasn't about revenge, it was about finding closure and moving forward, no matter what anyone else thought. So, as the months passed and life continued, I looked forward to a future filled with the love I had built, not just for Sophia, but for myself. And that, in the end, was the greatest justice of all.
That's it for today's story on Life Reflections. I'd love to hear your take. Drop a comment below with your thoughts or a story of your own. If you enjoyed this, give a like and subscribe to keep the reflections coming. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.